weddings are meant to symbolize certainty. They represent a moment when doubts fade, fears quiet down, and two people choose each other without hesitation. But in the world of 90-day fiancé weddings rarely arrive without chaos, and for Luke and Madelein, the hours leading up to their ceremony became the most emotionally devastating chapter of their entire relationship. As the sun rose on what should have been a joyful wedding day, tension lingered heavily in the air. The smiles felt forced, the laughter sounded hollow, and beneath every conversation was an unspoken fear that something was about to go terribly wrong. No one expected that the biggest obstacle wouldn't be a visa issue, cultural clash, or argument between the couple, but a father's final attempt to protect his son. Luke had waited a long time for this day. He believed deeply that Madelein was the woman he was meant to marry. Despite the constant doubts raised by friends, family, and even viewers, Luke held on to the idea that love required faith even when it didn't make sense to others. To him, questioning Madelein meant questioning the entire future he had imagined. But Luke's father saw things differently from the beginning. He had been watching quietly. He noticed how often Luke compromised, how frequently Luke defended Madelein's actions, how easily Luke dismissed his own discomfort in order to keep the peace. As a parent, these changes were impossible to ignore. And as the wedding drew closer, the fear that his son might be making a life-altering mistake grew stronger by the hour. Unlike explosive confrontations often seen on reality TV, Luke's father didn't storm into the room shouting accusations. Instead, he chose a calm but devastating approach, one that cut far deeper than anger ever could. Just hours before the ceremony, Luke's father asked Madelein for a private conversation. The timing alone made the situation unbearable. Wedding preparations were already underway. Guests were arriving, emotions were running high, and yet, this was the moment he believed mattered most. If there were doubts, they needed to be spoken now before vows were exchanged. Before promises became legally binding, before heartbreak became irreversible, Madelein was caught off guard. She hadn't expected this conversation, especially not so close to the wedding. In her mind, the relationship had already passed its tests. They were here, they were getting married. What more proof could possibly be needed? But Luke's father wasn't interested in appearances. He wanted answers. He began by explaining that his concerns didn't come from hatred or judgment. He emphasized that his only priority was Luke's happiness and well-being. He spoke about the sacrifices Luke had made, leaving behind comfort, stability, and familiarity in pursuit of love. And then, with quiet intensity, he asked the question that changed everything. "Are you truly committed to my son?" The room fell silent. This wasn't a simple yes or no question. It was a demand for emotional honesty. Luke's father wanted to know whether Madelein loved Luke for who he was, or for what he could provide. He questioned whether her commitment would remain strong when life became difficult, when the cameras disappeared, and when the sacrifices became real. Madelein struggled to respond. Part of her hesitation came from the pressure of the moment. Another part came from the language barrier. But there was also something deeper and emotional uncertainty that even she may not have fully understood. Her facial expressions revealed discomfort, defensiveness, and perhaps even a sense of betrayal. This was supposed to be her wedding day. Instead, she felt like she was being interrogated. Luke, listening from a distance, felt his heart sink. He had hoped his family would set aside their doubts for just one day. He wanted peace. He wanted celebration. But instead, he was forced to confront the reality that the people who loved him most weren't convinced this marriage was the right choice. For viewers, this moment felt both shocking and inevitable. Throughout the season, Luke and Madelein's relationship had raised numerous red flags. Arguments over money, control, and future expectations had revealed a power imbalance that many fans found troubling. Luke often appeared emotionally invested to the point of self-sacrifice, while Madelein sometimes seemed detached or demanding. Luke's father wasn't reacting to a single incident. He was reacting to a pattern as the conversation continued. Luke's father explained that marriage isn't just about love, it's about responsibility. He wanted reassurance that Madelein wasn't entering this union for convenience, opportunity, or escape, but for partnership. Madelein insisted that she cared for Luke. But her words lacked the emotional certainty that Luke's father was searching for. To him, her hesitation was alarming. To her, the questions felt unfair and intrusive. The tension grew unbearable. This wasn't just a disagreement between a future father-in-law and bride. It was a collision of fear, love, and timing. A father desperate to protect his son, a woman feeling judged at the worst possible moment, and a man stuck in the middle watching his dream unravel in real time. As the conversation ended, nothing felt resolved. The doubts remained. The questions lingered, and the wedding clock kept ticking. Luke was now faced with a painful reality. Once doubts are spoken aloud, they cannot be unheard. After the conversation ended, the silence that followed was louder than any argument. Madeleine walked away visibly shaken, trying to compose herself while the weight of the questions pressed heavily on her chest. This was not how she imagined the hours before her wedding. Instead of excitement and anticipation, she was now burdened with doubt, judgment, and emotional exhaustion. Luke, meanwhile, felt completely torn apart. He loved his father. He respected his opinions and knew that his concerns came from a place of care. But at the same time, Luke felt that this confrontation crossed a line. To him, the timing was cruel. If these doubts were so serious, why bring them up now when everything was already in motion? Luke couldn't ignore one painful truth. His father wasn't wrong about everything. Over the course of their relationship, Luke had often been the one bending, adjusting, and giving in. He told himself that compromise was part of love, but deep down there were moments when he felt unheard and undervalued. Still, he pushed those feelings aside, believing that marriage would somehow fix what was broken. Luke's father had seen this pattern before. In a private moment with the cameras, he explained that his own life experiences had shaped his fears. He had witnessed relationships that began with passion but collapsed under imbalance and unspoken resentment. He knew how easily love could turn into obligation and how devastating it was to watch someone lose themselves in the process. That's why he waited until the very last moment, not because he wanted to sabotage the wedding, but because he wanted Luke to pause, to think, to ask himself whether he was marrying Madeleine out of confidence or desperation. Madeleine, on the other hand, felt deeply misunderstood. From her perspective, she had left behind her own comfort, her own sense of normalcy, and her own expectations to be with Luke. She believed that her presence alone was proof of commitment. Being questioned especially by Luke's father felt like an attack on her character. She confided to the cameras that she felt judged unfairly. She questioned why Luke's sacrifices were always highlighted while hers were overlooked. To her, the narrative that she was taking from Luke felt one-sided and hurtful. But viewers noticed something troubling. When asked directly about her future with Luke about shared responsibilities, emotional support, and long-term partnership, Madeleine's answers often remained vague. She spoke about love but avoided specifics, about feelings but not plans. And for someone on the verge of marriage, that lack of clarity raised serious concerns. As the hours passed, wedding preparations continued, but the joy was gone. Luke tried to reassure himself that everything would be fine. He told himself that nerves were normal, that stress made people say things they didn't mean. But his father's words echoed in his mind. Marriage doesn't fix problems, it magnifies them. Friends and family members sensed the tension. The atmosphere was heavy. Every smile felt forced. Every interaction carried an undercurrent of uncertainty. No one wanted to be the one to say it out loud, but everyone was wondering the same thing. Should this wedding really be happening? Luke attempted to talk to Madeleine, hoping for reassurance. He needed to hear confidence in her voice. He needed to feel chosen. But the conversation didn't go as he hoped. Instead of calming his fears, it revealed just how disconnected they were emotionally at that moment. Madeleine felt overwhelmed and defensive. Luke felt unheard and increasingly unsure. This emotional disconnect only reinforced the concerns Luke's father had raised. It became clear that the problem wasn't just the timing of the questions. It was the fact that the questions didn't have clear answers for the audience. This was a defining moment. Some viewers sympathized with Matt, arguing that no one should be interrogated hours before their wedding. Others sided with Luke's father, praising him for speaking up when it mattered most. Many, however, felt heartbroken for Luke, who seemed trapped between loyalty to his family and his desire to believe in love. As the wedding hour drew closer, the pressure became unbearable. Luke now faced a decision that would define the rest of his life. Go through with the ceremony and hope that love would be enough, or walk away and risk losing everything he had fought for. And Madeleine faced her own reckoning. Was she ready to fully commit not just to a wedding, but to the emotional responsibility that came with being Luke's partner? The clock kept ticking. There was no pause button, no rehearsal for this moment. Whatever choice they made would be permanent, and somewhere in the middle of the chaos, one truth became painfully clear. Love alone is never enough if trust is missing.